All right, First Kings chapter 4. But again, just quick reminder this weekend, half an hour, just focusing on who God is, how good he is, how he's manifested his goodness in your life, and just bringing that to him in praise. But talking with him, reflecting, taking a walk outside, doing it by yourself, doing it maybe with family and leading maybe your kids and just helping them reflect on the goodness of God. Again, if there's anything that can do to help kind of give more ideas or things, feel free to contact me. Love to help you out. First Kings chapter 4 today. I always want to say this morning because one, I usually record these in the mornings, and two, I'm usually conceiving that's kind of, you might be starting your day, but I don't know why I assume that. Shouldn't do that. Anyways, First Kings chapter 4. This chapter is one of those that I wonder what people think sometimes when they're reading the Bible for the first time. A list of officials in God's story, the names of governors, like, why is this here? What spiritual value am I supposed to get from this? And again, I think it's maybe because sometimes we approach the Bible in a wrong way or for the wrong things. If we think the Bible is a how-to book for life, first and foremost, we're reading the Bible wrong. It has those elements in places, to be sure. I mean, there's aspects of Paul's letters, for example, that are absolutely how to live. But the Psalms are not necessarily that. The books of wisdom, Proverbs, much more that way. But the Bible is first and foremost, it's the revelation of God, most specifically all leading to Jesus. And so it's, how does this fit into what God is revealing about himself first? List of officials in God's story revealing about God. These names in this chapter fits the narrative here. Again, Solomon had asked for wisdom to rule God's people well. So how is God going to, help Solomon do that? What's the wisdom God is giving Solomon to carry that out? Here's something that I've learned in my own life, as a leader in different areas, whether church or otherwise. Part of good leadership is having healthy structures for the community, for the organization, for the people that are part of what you're in leadership of. Solomon didn't do everything. There's a system in place. There's people who helped institute Solomon's wise leadership. And so there are people who he's delegating to, that he's working through. There's a civil service. It's not the king who runs the country. The king helps give guidance and leadership, but doesn't do everything. That's not wise. And the wisdom of Solomon's structure and the people that he had in place here leads to a prosperity for the nation, as evidenced in the last part of the chapter. There's bounty, there's secure and expanded borders, and there's also needs for concern. I said yesterday that as these chapters that we're going to look at this week are all these high points of Solomon's kingdom, why he's considered like it's the golden age for Israel. But there's seeds for concern. There's things where Solomon, we already see, is not going to be the one who's going to bring that kind of kingdom of God, that Eden 2.0 to the earth, let alone only just specifically God's covenant people. And the seed of concern specifically I'll mention is Solomon amassed a force of 12,000 horses for chariots. That's actually expressly against the command of God for the king from Deuteronomy. Psalm 20, verse 7, the psalmist reflects, goes, some nations boast in chariots and horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. This is a misstep here by Solomon. Success and wisdom have you can call it a light side and a dark side. There's, every strength we have, and wisdom was a strength of Solomon's. Wisdom can have a light side, it can be a strength, but it can also be our weakness in certain ways if we're not careful. Here, Solomon is like, well, what's a wise thing to do? Well, having a military to protect against attack, that's part of having a secure border. The way the world works, the way these nations around me work, And rather than trusting in God's provision and God's protection, puts in place, well, I'll have the tools here, I'll do my part, and then God can do the rest. Where God said, no, in this area, it's me completely. I mean, Solomon in his early years, yes, he brought a lot of good to the nation. He ruled well, but seeds of destruction and division and independence from God are also being sown here. The gift of God, the wisdom, and all the wealth and the long life and all these things, they brought a shift in Solomon from dependence on God to dependence on the gifts that God gave him. The idols that we can have often are the good things we've received from God, even wisdom, but we put our trust in those gifts rather than the gift giver. Just simply, wisdom can be used for good, but it can also be used for evil. Just think of back a couple of weeks ago when David's son Amnon, he's like, hey, I want to figure out how to get a loan with my, half sister Tamar. And he has a friend who wisely gives some advice, wisdom used for evil. Our calling as followers of Jesus is to stay focused on God. Listen, trust, and obey. That's the path to wisdom, because it also keeps us focused on what God is saying through different things, how to use the gifts he's given without giving them a disordered place where we trust them more than him. And how do we listen and trust and obey God? Practices of engaging the scriptures, being in community, especially as we listen and read the scriptures together, study the scriptures, praying individually, corporately. We're obeying what God leads us to as he speaks. So I just want to encourage you to think of, what gifts have you been given? Maybe that's something you can thank God for this weekend as part of your time. How are you viewing them? How are you using them? Are you using the gifts you feel God has given you to bless others? Or is it kind of storing up for yourself so that you use them for your security and you're trusting them rather than trusting God? As you process this, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord be gracious to you. And today, would you know his peace? God bless.